Well, just like a rodeo, Jill Thomas brought some thrills to this interview today. You know her and you love her from an incredible run on Sweet 98 in Omaha, Nebraska for 17 years. But the lessons you're going to learn from Jill today is how to persevere when times aren't perfect. And she got some bad news in 2019. And what did she do? She took bad news and took lemons, turned them into lemonade, which a lot of great entrepreneurs do. You're going to learn about that lesson and just about perseverance in general and how it helped her become a savvy business owner and help her on her road to success in what has been an incredible radio career. You're going to love this episode with Jill Thomas on leadership lessons from Mayberry.
All right, I don't have any flyaways here.
See,
I'm just kind of like...
You have to do that.
I do.
I don't get the opportunity to.
No, you don't. And I'm jealous because you don't have to. You have to worry about it. That's the funny part about, and that's the funny part about doing video for me is I am so self-conscious because we never had video, right? Yeah. And working in radio, and I know we skipped a lot of stuff here, but getting back to it, but working in radio for all those years, I never had to worry about what my hair looked like. It typically was in a ponytail or a ball cap, typically had on sweats, typically had on, pajama pants, who knows. And then when they started using webcams, and I thought, oh, you gotta be kidding me.
It ruined all that.
It did, because when you're talking to people on the radio, they can't see your face. And we're making... so I was working with Pat, and so we're looking across the table at each other, or whoever I was working with, and you're kind of giving each other physical cues about either where you think this conversation's going, or that it's time to wrap things up, but the person talking can't see you. And so it was okay because you weren't distracting them, right? So if somebody says something, you're just like, oh God, they're going to go there. You're like, oh my God. Well, you can't do that when they can see you.
Right.
And so you have to like, oh, okay, I got to tone it down because I can't just throw it out there.
Well, I tell you what, has it made radio more or less spontaneous because of that?
Yeah.
Or has it added to it, do you think?
I think it depends on the
webcams.
The webcams, and then now video for the shows. Remember, it was back in the 90s that a couple of shows started doing cameras in the studio, and you could tune into them on TV, not just online, and they would have a cable channel of whatever that you could watch a radio show behind the scenes.
Oh, there were some good ones back in the late 80s.
Yes. And that's when they first started doing that. And usually it was a camera that was behind them so you could see the entire control board or their producer. And you could see them going through their notes, and you could see them talking on the phone, and people would watch. It was just voyeurism. It was just like you're just watching somebody do their job, right? Imagine just having a camera on you at work, and they're just watching you answer phones and watching you walk around, put stuff away. And
every basketball official in America would love that. If they put a camera on you, we're going to follow them around. Yeah. Speaking of voyeurism, this is it, folks. We're starting to hear this episode. We let you in on a little bit of what this topic and discussion is going to be about today. I get a chance to talk to Jill Thomas, the Ashland native. We're gonna step back, Jill, and talk a little bit about growing up in Ashland, how that influenced you onto what has been an incredible career. Sweet 98, and now a hit podcast. Businesswoman, savvy businesswoman, and on top of all the success you've had too. Out in the what we would call the media platform. Yeah. So this is a great honor to be here. But let's
I can go right back at you because everybody knows from Ashland that knows you have the Blue Jay Broadcast Network, which honestly, that is the coolest thing because growing up we didn't have that. Nobody cared about Class C. Right at the time.
Radio station.
Right. No radio station was covering our games, and we'll cover this. But I was working in a small town radio for a while, and absolutely loved it. It was for a number of years, and one of the benefits, I guess, was that it was already installed. They already had a couple of sports guys, and they covered all the high school games in the region. And they cover as many baseball games as they could, as many basketball games, football games, and these are kids that don't get coverage, like Ashland was in between Omaha and Lincoln. Nobody cared. And it's such a cool thing that you do that, because now, granted, they do get a little bit more because social media and there's a lot more ways to do it, but you were doing it when they weren't. And that's so cool for the kids, because you think about all the players that played when we were in high school. They didn't get that.
Yeah. You know, it's so funny that you say this, and I'm smiling because this is what makes you special, right? You just turned it right around, made this about me here for a second. And this show, Jill, darn it, it's about you today, because you've had an incredible
I'll try
run.
to behave.
And you know what? We're going to start with Ashland.
Okay.
Show's leadership lesson from Mayberry. Your Mayberry, of course, was Ashland, Nebraska. We always like to say with a little dysfunction in the late 80s and early 90s.
I know.
But what I love about your story is not just the success you've had, but watching people in Ashland, how proud they are, because that's what small towns do, right? To your point about basketball and broadcasting and football, they rally around theirs, right? Tell me about what it was like growing up in Ashland, and really how that instilled a lot of these great leadership, really these leadership traits that you have.
Yeah, so we had some great role models. We really did. We had some great role models from teachers and community members. You think about like the Ashland Gazette, which was still is a weekly paper, but it had offices right on Main Street on Silver. And I remember as a little kid how exciting it was to get the paper, and there was the social page that told who had a party or who had somebody over for cards.
West Ashland, East Ashland, yeah.
Yeah, and Grandma always, it was like if she had her parties and she played bridge, and if they were at the bridge parties, they always had on there who served and who hosted and who attended, and you wanted to see your name in the paper.
Yeah.
Right?
You know the only thing that was bad about those bridge stories, they never said who won.
They never did.
Come on.
No, and those ladies were tight-lipped, and these were the women of the town. These were the high-standing, then there was quite the little group of them that had been part of the fabric of Ashland, like in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, they were part of it. And I think of some of the names, that would pop through my head that would come over, and they'd have their card tables and their little thing of peanuts, but they had a thing of pennies, because they played for pennies. I think the pennies meant something else, but those ladies, and that was part of the community, but that was their way of getting together, and they would also talk about the things in the town while they were playing cards, right? And that's how things kind of got done.
Would we call that gossip?
Somewhat gossip. They would call it a meeting. But yeah, those ladies, my family, my grandparents were there. My dad grew up there. I had teachers my dad had, but yeah, the support from the community and the support of the town, it followed you. Yeah. When I'd have like something significant happen, it would end up in the Ashland paper, and I'd save them. I still have them. I still have the Ashland paper because it means something to me. It was in the Ashland paper. Yeah, it may have been in others, but it was in the Ashland paper, and that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, there is a great deal of pride, and I think the interesting thing about Ashland is it was tough growing up, right? It was a tough blue-collar town.
Yeah.
It's changed a little bit over the years.
Yeah.
But there was, of course, a lot of lessons learned in a tough blue-collar town, right?
Yeah.
But they always had your back. But it also may have developed kind of a chip on her shoulders, right? You look at you and the success you've had. Clay Anderson, Jeff Rakes, Danny Crittenbrink, ambassador to Vietnam and still with the State Department. I mean, there have been some amazingly successful people from the town at just 2,200 people. Did that kind of blue collar, that edgy, edginess to Ashland, do you think it drove people, and did it drive you? And if so, how so?
Yeah, because you were underestimated at every turn. You were underestimated, especially when you were around people that didn't know you or didn't know your abilities. There was assumptions made because you were from a small town in Nebraska. And that even happened to a degree when you competed in something in Omaha. Maybe even more so because they already had their preconceived ideas of what Ashland was and what some smaller, and especially you got farther west to Lincoln, they expected nothing of you. Right. So the bar was low.
I remember you saying you had some success in, I believe, was it rodeo against some folks maybe from the bigger cities?
Rodeos and horse shows. That's what drove me. I mean, it really did. It was like showing horses and getting better. I was driven. It's like they ask people, is it, and we've talked about the same concept, is it the thrill of victory or the what's the word, agony of defeat? Which one is it that drives you? It wasn't, yes, I wanted to win, but God, I hated to lose to those people.
What do you think it is for you then, more so?
I do not like to lose. I do not like to lose. I love the idea of winning, but it's more, isn't that weird that that means so, it's the same thing, but it means very different which one drives you, because it wasn't about me beating them. It was about I deserve to be there. And going to, depending on the kind of horse shows that you went to, we didn't go to the most expensive horse shows. There were way more expensive show circuits to follow. And that wasn't in our plan. Our plan was to have fun. Number one, that was my dad would tell you that right off the bat. Mom and dad both. It was like, you're going to go there and you're going to have fun. If you're not having fun, we're not doing this anymore. If it gets that serious, we're not doing this anymore. But in the back of my mind, I was going to win. I was like, that was just my driving force. And so I rode every day. I practiced every day. So, if somebody probably wondered, I didn't take part in a lot of school activities after, like sports and stuff until I got into high school. And then it was like, Jill, you need to try some other stuff. I played softball when I was a kid. Loved playing softball.
Did you have that same fire there, or was it more on that ag side and that rodeo and horse shows?
It was funny.
Was that your thing?
I was pitcher in softball, and we were kids, and I would go out to the barn, and Dad painted a target on the side of the barn for me, and I had some old softballs, and I'd go out there and just pitch at that target.
No wonder that barn is kind of tilting to one side.
Yeah, the balls are flat.
Took the toughness out of those softballs, right?
But it was like, if I'm going to do it, we're going to do it. That was it. It wasn't, I'm not going to show up and hope. That was kind of Dad. It was, if you're going to do this, we're going to do it. We're going to do it right. Same with taking care of your horses. You're going to do it right. You're going to, clean the stalls. You're going to clean the shed row. You're going to make sure stuff's put away. You're going to, that was part. If you didn't want to do that, then we won't do this anymore.
Yeah. I love that you talk about your parents so much, and I've had a chance to know them over the years as well. Talk to me about a leadership lesson that they gave you that has helped you over these years of success.
Yeah. Watching them, I wish I'd paid more attention, because they built their own company, and they were racing horses when Mom and Dad met and got married. And so they were on the track circuit racing, and that's how they made money. And Dad was training for himself primarily, but for some other people. There are pictures like of me as a baby. Mom was what they would call walking hots. It was like after they exercised, and then take them and walk them in circles to cool them down. And I'm sitting in front of her. There was no strap on me. There was no safety seat. There was just me sitting there holding the horn as a baby, just like holding this. And Mom's got a horse on each side, and probably was asleep because it was probably 6 a.m. So she's sitting there, but with her head down. And but she dove into that too, because that wasn't. When she got me, that wasn't the life she came from. But they started realizing, trying to make extra money, always being resourceful. What can we do to make extra money? And it was, we could haul a couple extra horses for somebody else, and then we can get a few bucks for doing that. And then I was like, this could be a good deal, because we didn't have somebody doing that in this region. And then they developed their own company. And along with a friend of theirs, and Hullen Smith Horse Fans is what was born out of that. And that was in the mid to late 60s. And so they built that company from the ground up, and it was amazingly successful, but they were also very humble, and they were so thankful for everything they had and the people that worked for them. They took such good care of their employees and loved every one of them. But then when Pat and I were put in the situation where we had to start our own company a few years back, and I'm like, I wish I would have paid more attention to this part, because I was in the office with Mom. Mom ran the office and Dad ran the shop, kind of. And Dad was on the road driving, and so but just the don't give up. It was just hard work will put you there. Hard work will put you there. It's not easy, but but I think that in your gut, this is the right thing to do. This is it. And I know there are some people that feel that way, and maybe it didn't work out. But you got to keep pushing, believing in yourself.
I love those lessons you get from just kind of osmosis, right? You saw the hard work. They just kind of put you out there, said, hey, you're going to help out. You saw these kind of innate lessons of entrepreneurship. Were your parents the type that, did they go with their gut when it came to entrepreneurship? What did they do, you think, to develop? And by the way, for those that don't know Hullen Smith, during the days of thoroughbred racing in Nebraska, it was a monstrous national company, not just local.
It was.
So this this incredible success they had. But
Yeah.
how do you think they formed it, and what did you pull from that, seeing how they developed this incredible venture?
I don't think they had, and I don't know. I know they didn't have a vision board. I will tell you that right now. They did not have like, this is what we envision this
Almost
being.
accidental?
It was like, well, yeah, we should do that. Well, yeah, we could do that better. It was like, do we want to offer? Yes, we can do that. We need more people. Okay, then we can do it. Is it better to take our trucks into a shop to get them serviced, or have our own shop and hire employees? Okay, this makes sense. We're going to do it this way. So it was very bottom line driven. I know that because they were both very conscientious of finances, and there wasn't like, oh, well, let's see. Until I was 12 years old, I was in a single wide trailer. We got a double wide when I was 12, and we were on the same 7 acres that my grandfather had. And I know some people, trailer. It's like, I loved that house. I still love those houses. It's like, but I remember we lived in a single wide trailer with 2 bedrooms, and I was in the one and mom and dad were in the other. And then when I was 12 was when we got the big trailer, when we got the big one. And that didn't even cross my mind. That was a deal. That's not a deal. But then you look back on it and you're like, they could have gone bigger, but they went in their means at the time. That was what they could do. And that was what made sense. It wasn't, like they say, don't borrow more than, right? And it's so easy to. You can easily over borrow and say, well, we're doing great. We're going to do great next year. Let's just roll the dice and let's go for it. Let's get that big whatever, And the same with vehicles. It wasn't having the biggest and the best. It was what made sense.
So you have this super modest background growing up, learned a lot from that, and yet you go into this profession of, you're out there.
I know.
Right?
I don't know
everyone
how that
can
happened.
see, everyone can hear you, from Phoenix to Hastings, back into Omaha. So we're gonna start this trail a little bit.
Okay.
So you come out of Ashland. Walk me through this. You end up in Phoenix, and we're going to talk about the JCs, Rodeo Queen, because it really did play a huge role in prompting you into your career. So let's start there.
It did. When I left high school, I tested well on the ACTs, right? So I got a scholarship to Doane. But my dream was to be a veterinarian, and they had a program that was connected with K-State at that time. And so I was like, well, this makes sense. Then I'll go there. And I knew what I wanted to do exactly. I wanted to work with racehorses. I wanted to work, it was all about the leg problems in particular, because young horses, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, I get there within 2 weeks, that program is canceled. But I continued on they have an equine program that was there. And there were a couple of people, Boomer, Equestrian Stables, which is outside of Crete, and then also Ricky Beck. She was an instructor that was there, and she's a dressage champion in her own right. She was one of our instructors. Thought the world of her. So I still learned a lot in that program that I was in, but it wasn't going to take me where I needed it to go. And so I was kind of, what am I going to do? And then my roommate left after the first semester. So I had a room to myself, which was kind of nice, as far as the dorms.
Pretty social.
I know, we were still in the dorms, which was my first time like living next to anybody, because we'd always been kind of out of town, right? And so I had literal neighbors, and I had to share a bathroom. I found out I don't like that. But that was fun, and met a lot of people, and it was all great. And then the next spring, Grandma took me to Phoenix to go meet great aunt and uncle for a 50th wedding anniversary. Didn't know the family, but I went down there and I fell in love with the place. And so by July of that year, I moved to Phoenix and was going to Arizona State. And so at Arizona State for a short while, didn't have my horses. And then I'm like, that's got to change. So we found a place to board them and brought the horses down. And so I had my ponies and everything was good. And then I went and got a job at Target. I never worked retail again. Nothing against Target. I like shopping Target. I do.
Yeah, I was going to say, because,
mad respect for people that work there. It's not easy working retail.
But you're not going back. No part-time at Christmas.
Yeah, right? Nope. I'll find another way to do something. But anyway, in the break room one day, I saw a sign on the wall that just said the Phoenix JC's Rodeo of Rodeos Queen Competition. And I'd been the Ashland Rodeo Queen. I'd shown horses. I thought, I'm going to do this. Again, small town Ashland, Nebraska. And I didn't even cross my mind that there were politics involved in this at all. It's a queen contest, but by being the Phoenix Rodeo Queen up till the year I ran another one of those deals. The one who won the Phoenix Rodeo Queen contest was Miss Rodeo Arizona. And so in succession, you would go through, and then you would go to Miss Rodeo America in Las Vegas. Up till the year I ran. They changed it that year. Okay. But I found out by the person who was running the program, well, there were other girls that were from Buckeye, Arizona. They were from Safford, Arizona. They were from, name a different, all the different towns in Arizona. Why would somebody who just moved to Arizona be the person that they select to be their rodeo queen? I was an outsider. A definite outsider.
What won them over? I think I can guess.
I got really involved with the JCs, number one, and I met a lot of people that were there. But I genuinely, it was like, you better bring it to the table. It was a horsemanship competition. It was, you had an interview also, and then you had to do a speech and runway kind of thing, which the runway thing is like, I don't even know what to do with that. But so you still had to, and got to give like Mrs. Starnes some credit from high school, right?
Little
being
theater.
On stage, exactly, yeah. Right? So that definitely played back into it. There were a couple other teachers I can think of people that it's like I pulled that stuff. That's where that came from.
Yeah, and I want to just stop you right here because what a lot of people might think is that at this point you'd made up your mind that radio or media might be your thing. You don't know even at this point that this is where you're going. Hey, we're going to take a quick break in the show so that you know about Farmers and Merchants Bank of Ashland, the sponsor of Leadership Lessons from Mayberry. You know, few banks can say they've been around for 139 years, but Farmers and Merchants Bank of Ashland has. Why? Because they are locally owned, locally managed, and they are focused on you. They offer full service business banking, and you're always going to talk to a live person when you give them a call. They're commercial lenders. They are more than happy to share their expertise and to help you navigate any business financing that you may need, including SBA, TIF, or NEDCO financing. Check them out at fmnb.com or give them a call at 402-944-3316. Member FDIC, an equal housing lender.
That's right.
So this is taking you down that road. So you're giving speeches, you're meeting people, and honestly, you're selling yourself, right?
Yeah,
to this community that didn't know you.
And then as it turns out, that was going to be my job as the Phoenix Rodeo Queen. So I was an attendant, went from attendant to lady in waiting to the queen. And we traveled all around the western third of the United States, going to these big rodeos and again, selling the Phoenix Rodeo. And giving speeches, being on radio interviews, going on television interviews, and riding in parades and meeting people and going to chili feeds and all that good stuff. But it was all about putting yourself out there, which was against my nature to a degree. It was hard.
So how does this opportunity kind of introduce you then?
Yep.
To that radio, because at some point something's going to trip you up and the light bulb goes off and you said, this is it. Not only do I want to do radio, but it also introduced you to some business opportunities too.
It was crazy because one of those that's one of those things about doors open for you and you have to decide if you want to go through them or not.
Yeah.
And one of the doors that opened up was a radio morning show guy, and W. Stephen Martin was his name, and he was morning guy on KNAX in Phoenix. And my last radio interview was with him before the last rodeo started, and we got done and he said, well, after we were off the air, and he just said, so what are you going to do now? You know, hang up the crown and what's next? I said, I think I want to work in promotions, and because I like doing this, like getting out and promoting things and being an ambassador, if you will, or something like that. Maybe one of the PRCA big sponsors, the Stetsons, the Justins, the Copenhagens, all that stuff. And, oh yeah, that'd be great. He said, but have you ever thought about going into radio? Nope. Didn't even know that was a thing.
Did it click then? Did it hit you right then?
I got real excited about it after he talked to me about it because I didn't know it was a thing. And I'm like, really?
Why was that? Because here you are working. Yeah. Was it because you were a woman at that point? Because it was still a very male-dominated industry.
It was.
Or was it just not clicking for some other reason?
I knew TV was a thing. It just never dawned on me that radio was a real job. It just seemed too fun. It just seemed like every radio station, it just seemed like that has to be something people do for fun. You get paid to do that. It didn't make sense. Of course, I knew nothing about what goes on the backside. But just on face value, you watch TV, You know that the news guy gets paid. You know, actors get paid. But radio, it did not click until he explained to me. And then I'm like, really? And he gave me some names and suggested I check out, there was a broadcasting school. But the bonus of that was all the instructors worked in radio in Phoenix. And he said, you'll meet a lot of people that work in radio here in town. You'll make networking. It's all networking, is it not? Is meeting people and making relationships. And that's what got me my first job. That was, so I did enroll at the school. And the funny thing was, my first job was an internship at a radio station in Phoenix. And it was a new morning show that just came into town. And they were looking for interns, so they called the school. And they took me. And I was excited. So I meet the morning show that I'm going to be doing. I'm an intern producer. Green, wet behind the ears, all that good stuff. And I walk in just wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I'm like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, and I met him, and he says, hi, I'm Glenn Beck, and this is Tim Hattrick. Awesome. And Glenn Beck, I was in awe of him because he was the same age as me and had already been in radio for 10 years.
And he wasn't having that meteoric rise at this point, correct?
He was on his way. Okay. He was on his way. He was a top 40 radio guy. So he did a morning show. He was entertainment. He was hilarious. A lot of the same elements that you see in his show now. Granted, he's political, more religious. All of that has changed, but he went through a lot in the 90s. But at that time, he was an entertainer. And he'd just come from Memphis, Tennessee. He was doing the morning show there. He'd done others morning shows. And he was just like, he was in the industry. He was like on his way up. And so this is really, and he's in Phoenix, this top 20 market. This is huge. And so I was super excited to be working with them. And we had a great company that we worked for. The owner of the company is based out of Florida, and he came up all the time, and he was super cool. Just a lot of opportunity. And I learned a ton from Glenn and Tim. No idea who Glenn Beck would become. No idea. But I am so thankful for the opportunity to work with him. And looking back now, it was the beginning of his problems where he was. He was a very young guy making a ton of money. And he was on his first marriage at that time. And I don't know all the particulars of that, but we know what's in Wikipedia is that his first marriage didn't last. And that he blames on some of the problems he was going through at the time. There was some drug issues, there were some drinking issues, and there was just some personal crisis is what it came down to. But learning from them, that was my first job. And that led, and I wasn't on the air on the regular. I was Jill E. Bean, the love machine, which I was just mortified by that. And every once in a while, they would call me to the third mic and ask me questions, and they'd give me a hard time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you always said they were very respectful.
Very respectful.
But what a name, by the way. What a name.
I know. He came up with that. Jilly Bean, the love machine. I'm like, oh my God, that's just awful. I hope my mom never hears that. I hope my dad never hears that. Nobody from
She's
Ashland.
going to now.
Right? Everybody knows now. And then also while I was there, I met some women that worked in radio that weren't just doing the weather or weren't just doing the traffic, which in radio at that time, if you were a woman in radio, you were a sidekick who got to speak when the morning guy said you get to speak. It wasn't abusive. It was just the way it was. And most of the women all of them that I know that were in that position, they were happy as clams because that was where they wanted to be because they had other ideas that they wanted to do. This was going to be a stepping stone for many of them. It was getting that on their resume that they worked with so-and-so and they were going somewhere else. Some of them, that's where they stayed.
But there was an exception to that rule, right?
Yeah, there was. There was a couple of them that worked at that radio station, and one in particular worked on the morning show, and she did the news. And her name was Pat Powers. I haven't seen her since I left there. But she was the one that kind of took me under her wing and encouraged me. And, there's more to this than just doing X, Y, and Z, and told me when I did good, told me how to do better. She just kind of watched out for me. I didn't realize it till years later.
Was she your first mentor or coach in the industry?
Yeah.
And was she the one that had the most impact, or were there others?
She had the most impact, probably ultimately. Because without her, I don't know if I would have stayed. because she kind of opened my door to other possibilities and made it okay for me to talk to other people that were interested in hiring me for on-air positions. I wasn't going to get on air at this station. This station was too high up on the totem pole. It's kind of like they said at the time, you wouldn't expect to get a job in Omaha at that time if you didn't have at least 5 years experience. And that's not the case anymore. Because the farm team is so much smaller. They don't have farm teams literally for them to learn at to make your way up the ladder. It's like all the smaller stations. A lot of them have voice work done for them. The voice is, it's a prepackaged deal. So they don't have people live announcers and a lot of them because they can't afford it. And so you've lost out on those educational opportunities. So working in a large market at that station was a huge opportunity I had no concept of at the time. And then getting the next job was at another huge station, but they put me on one of their smaller stations, smaller signals is where they put me. But it gave me a chance to be on the air. And actually, yeah, that was kind of how I got my name, as a matter of fact, because I don't use my government name on a day-to-day basis. I know that. Everybody that knows me knows that. But that was kind of more of a safety thing. Being in Phoenix is a large city, right? So at the time, it was 1.5 million. I think it's like 3 million now. Who knows?
Yeah, it's a monster.
It's a monster. Wow. But when I was working on the air at that second station, I wasn't on the air yet, and I was running the board for somebody else that was doing something. And he said, "What do you want me to call you?" And I said, "Well, don't use my real name," because one of the other girls, and I'm just going to say her name was Mary. She had a different name on there. She was called the Bone Mama. And the reason why is because
she FM names or something else.
She was on a rock station, but she liked to make jewelry. It's so macabre. Anyway, she was really cool. But I never knew her real name. And she even had her pseudonym in the phone book back in the day because she didn't want her real name to be out anywhere. So if you were going to be listed, use your pseudonym. Otherwise, be unlisted, because you don't want, there was something to that. I don't know. She didn't have her address listed, but there was the possibility of somebody finding you that liked the station a little too much. And this was a metal station, heavy rock station. And then it had a country station, then it had another rock station. But so there were some real dedicated listeners, but that was one of the precautions. It was like, don't use your real name. So the guy said, "I'll come up with something when I introduce you. This is your first time on?" I said, "Yes." Oh my God, you don't need to talk to me. I'm fine. That's okay. Just let me push my buttons. I'm fine. And so he comes to me, he calls me Jill Thomas. And afterwards, I'm just like, okay, so we're
by mistake.
He meant to.
Okay.
He meant to, because I told him don't use my real name. And he said, "Well, we're on Thomas Road." And I said, "Well, thank God you weren't on Camelback." Because I'm like that was what you used, really? It could have been. There was McDowell, there was Thomas, there was all the street, Thunderbird, all these other streets, Greenway. It could have been, who knew? But he was on Thomas Road, and that was how. And so it just stuck.
And stuck from there on out.
Yeah.
Now, in the meantime, before we get to your big break at Sweet 98 brings you back to Omaha, you get in to your first opportunity to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You and a couple of other partners buy a little teeny tiny radio station in Hastings, Nebraska. You get your feet wet in business. What was that experience like?
All of that, all the stuff that I'd learned in Phoenix, all the stuff that I'd learned from the other people that I'd worked with at different radio stations. And I get put into a situation where we're working in Lincoln, and I meet a gentleman who graduated from Hastings College, but grew up in the Beatrice area. And then his son, and then a couple of other guys. One of them is a radio broker that worked out of Lincoln, and another one is a sports guy that worked at the small station in Hastings, Nebraska, KHASKICS. And they were like, they asked me if I'd be interested. And I was honestly, wow, that's cool. You want me to be part of this. So I thought I must have something to bring to the table. That just gave me a little more confidence. And and actually Mom and Dad and I all did. We all just like, you know what, let's do this. Let's go ahead and be a part of this. And we bought these 2 little AM stations, and they were in the red. The station was owned by the same people who owned the TV station and the newspaper. And then again, like everybody perceives, the radio station is just kind of like, we'll just like, because everybody likes TV because it's glamorous, and newspaper is traditional, and then there's the radio, but regardless, we had to go from square one. And starting off everything from how we ran the books, who's going to run the office, who's going to do which jobs. And it wasn't like we went down a list and said, that's your job, that's your job, that's your job. Everybody just knew what their strong points were, or what areas they were most interested in. And it worked perfectly. And within a year, we were in the black. And we turned that thing around.
Why did you turn it around? Let's get one leadership lesson here in business. Tell me what you guys did, do you think, when you boil it down, that went from red to black?
Yeah. I think a big part of it was immersing ourselves in that community. So people got to know who we were. Our connection with the area via the gentleman who wanted to start this endeavor. Granted, he hadn't been there for 30, 40 years, but he had that connection to the college, right? And so that was our little hook, itty bitty hook that we could have some traction on. But ultimately it was meeting people, meeting the business leaders, talking to the business owners, and getting to know the community leaders, and telling them this is what we want to do, and we want to breathe some life into this and bring it back. And they were all on board, and it was a community effort, and then it benefited a wide area, because those little small stations in Hastings serve 250,000 people. That's a big area, because it was up to Grand Island, down into Kansas and east and west. So it wasn't like, it's a small town. It served a huge purpose. And so it hadn't been live radio for ages. And so we were live from 6 a.m. till I think 8 p.m. And AM stations, you power them up in the morning and you power them down at night, right? And so it was old school all the way. I mean, we had the transmitters right there in the station with us. We were on the transmitter location, as a matter of fact. We finally moved there. But I learned more about radio in that building. I learned about production and promotion and presentation when I was in Phoenix. I learned the backside of everything when I was in Hastings. That was a real education.
It's eye-opening, not just being that on-air talent, right?
Yes.
Now you've got to think about books and promotion and all of those things. Now they come together. Sounds like you had a great team as well. And speaking of a great team, you and Pat Safford, you team up. You land this gig in Omaha at Sweet 98, the gig. And for 17 years, you guys rule the airwaves.
We did pretty good.
But it's a great story because, first off, you and Pat, you guys look like you've known you have known each other for years, but at the time you didn't know each other at all. You get kind of this blind audition and you get the gig. Walk us through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's such a great story.
It was typical radio. That was putting together a new morning show. And there are a lot of other stories that go along behind on the backside of this, I think. But I will say that when they pulled us together, when a guy I used to work with 10 years before was working at that station. And so he suggested me, and we'd been in touch all those 10 years. And I tried to get back into Omaha because I wanted to come closer to home. And it's like, no, I don't want you to come here yet. No, I don't want you working with that guy. No, I don't want you. He was looking out for me.
Was this Neil Nelkin?
And yes, it was.
Oh,
Uncle Neil, the Godfather.
And by the way, Hall of Famer now.
Hall of Famer, Nebraska Broadcasting Hall of Fame. And he was, and everybody, the Godfather. I mean, they so many names for him, but he came from North Platte. So he was a small town radio guy too. And he knew, literally, he knows where all the bodies are buried across the state. But but everybody knows him. But he is so good at putting people where they should be. And you see that with the sports guys that he's worked with over the years. He puts them in a position to succeed, and he knows the right time to plug them in. And so it was just trusting in his instinct and just keep grinding on my end. And then another guy in the station knew of Pat, and Pat was doing mornings in Tulsa at the time with someone else. And Pat's from Waterloo. So it was like both of us are going to get to, quote, come home. And they brought us together in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. Early in it was like in the winter. And so I drove in. Pat drove up from Tulsa. He was staying with his parents. I drove in from Hastings, and we had a 2-hour show and found out our humor was the same. We paid attention to the same things, but we complimented each other also. We weren't a lot alike, but we did compliment each other. So that was it.
And this is no small undertaking, because Sweet 98 at this time is not necessarily blowing out. And this, again, leans back on your leadership, Pat's leadership, Neil's leadership. Did you guys have a plan? Was it like, look, we're gonna do this to really resurrect this? Was it just, let's go again with guts? How did you construct this turnaround in Sweet 98?
I don't even remember who the operations manager was at the time. That's so weird. I remember the PD, and he was good. He's still very good, and he's way high up now, up the ladder, nationally. Right, this guy was amazing. I don't remember who operations was, but this guy, Tommy was his name, and he had a vision about how to put this together. And it was us trusting him. Well, I trusted Neil, so I trusted Tommy. Again, networking. It's like you're leaning into the relationships you have to understand who you can trust. You still follow your gut, but that kind of gives you some indication of what way to go. And so I trusted what Tommy, we sat down and we're like, this is the deal. The station's been underwater for a couple of years. It hasn't had a morning show for 18 months. So it's a clean slate. Nobody has any expectations, but we're going to try and bring this back to life and see what we can do. And Pat had years in, I think he's been in radio about as long as I have, I think. But regardless, it was interesting because his experiences were so different than mine. And so we both had our own way of coming at things. Interesting part though is I'd always run the board in the other morning show that I'd been in and all the shows I'd been in, and he ran the board. So there was that moment of looking at each other. It's like, okay, who's running the board here? We need to solve this because we can't trade off.
No power struggle with this. I would think you both would be like, please do it, but no.
It was honestly, I gave it up and I couldn't have been happier, and it worked out well for him too. He was good too, but it worked out really well. So he was the one that was going to do it, but it was just following our gut instincts, but also we had a plan. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to put this together, formatting the morning show and just going through the process that we knew. It was a good formula and it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for 17 years, it worked. And by the way, when you see Jill and I pop our heads up, our producer Grace, who is working so hard, she's trying to keep us on track with time, Jill. But know we're going over, right?
I know this, and we're trying not to. We're trying to, but it's so hard because we know each other. And
yes. And how do we listen? And your story is so great. I love hearing it because so many people can learn from this, because you talk about perseverance, perseverance to get Sweet 98 going, KHAS, you guys turn that around. 17 years later, you're killing it. The morning show's doing very well.
Yeah.
Yet someone makes a decision to end the show. So let's start with first up, just that moment of knowing and what you went through, because there was a gift that came behind it. But at that moment,
oh my God,
I'm sure you're not feeling that way.
It was interesting. Is one thing it did drive home is having when people say having control of your future. I love listening to people talk about their stories of how they got where they are. Really, there was a really interesting one. I think it was Shaquille O'Neal was doing a podcast somewhere, and he had been given the advice and I think it was Kobe Bryant. They gave him the advice. It's like, yeah, you think you're all successful now, dude. Okay, now start buying land. Now start investing in yourself. Now start putting, it's like that kind of thing. It's like, don't be buying all the shiny nickels. Don't be, doing all that stuff. Take care of yourself first. And that's what kind of it drives home more than ever for a lot of people. Is I think you look at a lot of people right now, everybody, when they're coming out of college or high school or whatever, it's like they want to be influencers. They want to be, they want to do that stuff on social media. And it's like, well, that's fine, but that comes and that goes. I mean, live by the sword, die by the sword. And you want to find a way to develop a skill set and have a good, solid base and foundation that you can rely on yourself moving forward when things turn on a dime. And the totally unexpected happens. And the totally unexpected happened to us. And it was out of the blue. But they're like, okay, we're going to be done in 3 months. We aren't going to come back to this. But Pat and I had been for years watching what was going on in podcasting, because podcasting came, the history of podcasting, I oddly know this, but that's my job. But podcasting started in 2002. So it's been around for a long time. And there people really got into it. Some did like in 2008, 2009, and then 2012, 13, 14. We're watching this and we're thinking, oh, it's coming. And we were trying to get our company to move in that direction. And they did not. The people that were right above us did not see the value. I think the higher up they probably would have, but in that moment, they just didn't see the value in it. So we're watching it. We keep expecting it to pop, keep expecting it to pop. We think, oh, there it is. He didn't do it. Oh my God. And we're just like, somebody's going to do it. And so when this happened to us, that was kind of the door opened. The golden handcuffs were off because we were in a position where we wouldn't have left that job if we hadn't been given the opportunity to leave that job. And that's what gave us the opportunity to develop our own company and do podcast production and audio production. We never would have done that if we'd stayed where we were, because we were doing great. Why would you walk away from that? And instead it was, and so it was an opportunity to walk away. It wasn't done to us. It was done for us ultimately. And many people have said that, it's like, yeah, that was a great opportunity. That was a great chance for you to move forward. And it's like, yeah, and we needed that. And so we started our little company doing audio and podcast production for marketing purposes. So companies could develop an audio product for their websites or a podcast where people can hear their voice talking about their product. Because up to this point in commercial marketing or any kind of marketing, you'd have a professional spokesperson or somebody else would write the copy or the words for you. You'd approve it, or somebody else would do the design. You'd approve it. This is you. So people are seeing you, like when you're talking about what you do, they get a real flavor for your culture, the words you choose to use, how you choose to present them, what your body language says. That's what podcasts can do for companies, way better than any professional spokesperson can.
Now, listen, and I love it, and you are so right. And I've seen the value of it, not just me personally, but so many business owners who say, look, this is a great way to really tell our story and to get into that community in which you work in, right? But you start Parkville Media after this really tough
change in direction.
Yeah. You talk about the old saying, what, lemons in the lemonade, right? I mean, you guys, you don't even think, you just go.
Yeah.
And you react and you create Parkville Media. And it's a great success. So much so that Hurrdat Media, they come in, they look at what you're doing. They're like, we want to buy you, we want to acquire you, and we want you to continue on with your great journey. So
yeah, again, that was a relationship because one of our clients asked the owner of Hurrdat to be on their podcast to talk about entrepreneurship. And so Bill Hipsher, who owns Hurrdat, was the guest on their podcast in our studio, our quaint studios, but very effective. And then about 2 or 3 days later, we got the offer. We got you got to sit down and talk. And let's talk about this. And he has these visions. And it's like, oh my gosh, here's somebody else. And because he worked with that client, I had a relationship with them, Pat and I did, because this is the client, and it was a bank. They were the only bank that would give us a checking account when we wanted to start our company, right? They believed in us. And so we had a relationship with them. And because that guy was on their podcast, and I'm like, okay, tell me about that guy. And they told me about that guy. And I'm thinking, okay, he sounds really interesting. Let's talk about this. And he starts talking about what he sees coming down the road for Hurrdat. And Pat and I are like, oh yeah. Yeah. And he thought we should be a part of that. He wanted us to bring what we had into this so we can help get this ball rolling. And honestly, I was just having this conversation the other day. From Parkville Media, we get acquired by Hurrdat. We become Hurrdat Media. We went from 20-some podcasts to now 100 podcasts. We have owned properties. We have created podcasts. We have our own content creators with Hail Varsity Magazine, which is owned by Hurrdat as well. And now from Parkville Media, we have spawned Hurrdat Sports. Hurrdat Sports started with one person, and now it's 12. We started with 3 people because it was me and Pat and the person that we were just bringing on board with us, Sasha. And so us 3, we come here, and that grows to 12 to 15. Then Sasha breaks off to do Hurrdat Sports, and now that's 12 to 15. So from Pat and I, it's now turned into a 30-person operation, just Hurrdat Media, Hurrdat Sports. And that was part of his vision, though.
Yeah.
And he was right. He, like Neil, planted us in the right ground and gave us the right opportunity and then let us do it.
What is, when you look back on that, there are lots of folks that are going to listen to this who say, what did you learn the most? I want to glean from her what she learned the most from this process, starting Parkville Media, and then the acquisition over to Hurrdat Media. What did you learn as a business owner? What'd you learn that you can give to somebody?
Again, you need to find somebody in the business world that you trust that can point you in the right directions. Because it wasn't, when I say that, backing up to what I was just talking about, it started with just us two, and it's that. I don't want that to sound like we did all this. There's so many other people, all of the talent that came on board that did this, but also the people that you don't see. One of the first things that was told to us by a friend, and he helped us out by giving us an office space to create a studio when we didn't have 2 nickels to be able to afford to rent space. And he turned us on to the right attorney, the right accountant, the right insurance person. These were people he knew that he worked with, and all these people knew each other, so they knew how each other worked, and they were able to guide us on all that stuff, the legal stuff on the backside that we didn't know anything about, and they helped us make the correct moves. And that's the same thing here. Bill's that person, and Chris is that person, and so many other people that work here, they know their stuff. And so it's like understanding who knows what they know and asking them for help. Because most people are more than happy to help you out if you don't understand how something works.
And it sounds like that is something you relied on a lot, is that putting that trust in people, being willing to be mentored, maybe to be coached, right? To learn and take, that assistance. That's a great way to put it. Grow.
Yep. Being willing to be coached.
Yeah.
Tiger Woods needs a coach. He's the best in the world. Even he needs a coach. That always rings, and it's just like, it resonated with me the first time somebody said that to me. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. I smile.
We all need a coach.
Yeah. I smile at that, because not only did Tiger need a coach, it's famous that his coach would literally put his hands on him, right? Let's get your backswing like this. And this is the greatest player in the world. And yet he's vulnerable enough to say, I can take this kind of instruction. Now listen, I'm going to plug something here. Because,
I was just going to ask you something before you go on, because I know where you're going. When you're working with people, do you ever have people, they're on top of their game, but they need some coaching? Do you run into resistance sometimes? It's
interesting. Most of the time, folks that are performing at a high level, they know something's just a little off. Like, they know their business is going great guns, but something isn't right. Maybe there's something wrong with their time. They are spending way too much time at work. They're struggling delegating.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something that's just not quite right with their team or their money situation, meaning they want new revenue streams or those kinds of things. They know it's there. And sometimes the higher they're performing, the more they're aware of it. So they're oftentimes willing to say, look, I know something's not quite right here, even though things are going great.
Right.
But so that's where a coach can come in handy. And boy, thank you for the plug.
No, it's true. It's true. What you do is so important, because, and especially, when you're in a business that's growing, maybe you're not up here yet, but you're trying to get there. I understand the feeling. You don't want to say, I don't get this, or I don't know how to make this happen, because you feel like that's a sign of weakness. And it's not. It's not.
Right.
It's not.
And just like for you, someone from the outside, right, kind of looking in, you've got all these partners that helped you. Sometimes they can be the most valuable because they're not quite so close to it. And you get that objective set of eyes. And by the way, you talk about incredible success. Now you guys go, not only do you had Parkville Media, you went through that acquisition with Hurrdat Media, and you're part of that now, but you have an incredibly successul podcast in the morning with Pat. You guys are still together. And I have to ask you this, because I think a lot of people want to know. We talked about this. This is our second run, folks.
We've talked before. Yeah, that's okay.
But you and Pat, as good as you are together, it's kind of like that Abbott and Costello, relationship. Like, you're super tight, you're great at what you do, but at night, you guys aren't necessarily hanging out and on weekends. And I think explore that a little bit with me, because a lot. Of people, I'm sure, just assume, oh my gosh, they're probably inseparable.
Yeah, right. Our families probably hang out and do picnics, right? It's like they don't. We never have hung out together.
Even back in the early days of Sweet 98. No.
Socially, I think I went to Pat's house once. I think he helped me move something once. I think, I don't even know.
That with so much enthusiasm.
Right? I don't even know if he knows where I live right now. I really don't. I don't know. I'm trying to think. I kind of know where he lives, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't hang out. But then you think about business partnerships or entertainment partnerships or anything like that. A lot of them, they aren't now, some are, but they aren't like hanging out together. They have complementing skills or complementing personalities, and what they enjoy doing outside of that are two entirely different things. But that's what brings the magic, if you will. You have the right mixture, but those two things don't hang out together all the time.
And it doesn't get old that way, right?
No,
I mean, you guys keep it fresh because you're not spending 80 hours a week together.
I was going to say, it's funny is that when we talk about, because it's 20 years that we've been doing shows, right? So we've got 1,200 episodes of our podcast, and each about 20, 30 minutes a day. And how many hundreds, thousands, whatever, of radio shows, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. Still finding out things and have stories and finding out things that you didn't know before, or bringing new things to the table. So, it is, and that does take some work also, because there is something for show prep to a degree. You're always doing it. You're always looking for things to talk about. You're always looking for interesting angles on things. It's not just sitting down and talking about what you did the day before. There is a little bit of work to it that there's a process to doing it. But
that's what shocked me last time we talked. You said, look, we don't do a lot of preparation. We go in and you just go with your gut.
We sit down and we did it this morning. We sit down and it's like, okay, what do you have? Do you have anything? Anything happened? Do we have any emails you want to read? Or just, he says, we have a text, but I think I'm going to save that and do Pat GPT with that. He's starting to use the AI.
Yes.
Which is creepy because it does his voice, but it's real staccato speaking. It's not real smooth yet. We don't have the paid version or whatever. I don't know what it is, but you've probably heard some of the AI conversations that people have, and they sound perfect. The one that we're using is kind of stocks, like monotone, just it's like that right now, but it's Pat. It's his voice. It's creepy. So that's his new thing. But anyway, it's like, and I'm like, I've got something, said something happened to me yesterday. I'm just curious if I'm wrong about this. I also saw a story about blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, great. We just know, we're going to tick the boxes. These are the things we're going to try to talk about. And sometimes they don't all fit. And sometimes you get led to something else, when you're talking, and just follow it,
I love it. Yep. It's been a great run. It's going to continue to be a great run, folks. Yeah. Now we're going to plug you here a little bit.
Yes.
Your podcast, how do they get it? Yep. And it is hilarious. I listened to a show last week. I'm crying. I'm laughing so hard about something that happened in Pat's neighborhood that night, and it was
the police were involved.
Fantastic. Yeah. But Pat wasn't. He was just an observer, but he was nosy.
He was a very nosy neighbor. Yeah. Yes. If you want, it's anywhere you listen to your podcast, whether it's on YouTube. We have Facebook Lives that we do once a week. We also, and that's on Fridays. We have a podcast every day, but anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts. Some people are just learning how to get podcasts. You can get them on Spotify. Apple Podcasts comes with the app on your Apple phones. Spotify, you might follow. I use Google Podcasts. That, for some reason, that's just my favorite. But there are several different platforms where you can find them. And once you get it, subscribe. Most people don't have them downloaded automatically to their phone because it takes up a lot of space. You can get notifications when there's new episodes. And then I will tell you too, you can check out our website, which is hurrdatmedia.com. And there you'll see a whole bunch of podcasts that are podcasts we have on our network. And ours is on there. When you click on those podcasts, it'll bring up the latest episodes there too. And
here's
links
what's fun too, folks. If you want to get out on a Thursday night and have some fun and laugh and hang out, Hell Varsity now has, or Hurrdat Media now has Hell Varsity. It's a bar and grill. And you guys are going to be the featured show on Thursday night, so I got to hear about that because I will be there.
It's going to be fun. The inaugural, so as we speak, we're in April of 23, but we're starting the first episode live is going to be on May the 4th. Be with you. May the 4th, 2023. That's a big weekend. You got May the 4th, you got Cinco de Mayo, and you got Derby weekend. All kinds of stuff is going on.
We're talking Kentucky Derby.
Kentucky Derby, yes. And we'll be out there for the show on Thursday. So the first and third Thursday of every month. We're going to be out there, and we're going to play some games. We're going to record an episode of the podcast, and we have some appetizers for our guests. We'll take care of you, so we'll feed you. We aren't going to buy your drinks.
Boom. I like it. Drop that mic. This has been amazing. I think.
Did I say Hell Varsity Club?
Yes. Hell Varsity if you did, Club. Hell Varsity Club. And that's amazing, too, by the way.
And it'll be in the show notes. We'll do that. There we go.
Yes.
Very good.
Listen, the folks in Ashland, Nebraska, they sit up straight when they hear your name, right? And they are proud as heck of you. You've had an incredible career. So many people who listen to this are going to pick up so many impressive and important lessons, not just in business, but in also just how to persevere. To me, the story about you is perseverance and that ability to connect with people.
Yeah. It was nothing. None of this was like, I didn't have an intentional career path when this started. So some people that think this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to be, and this is, and they are very good at planning those things out and following through. God bless you. I'm jealous because that's really cool. But by the same token, this has taken me places I didn't see coming. Leaving Phoenix, I didn't see coming, but it was just in my bones. It was time to come back to Nebraska, and that was the only reason I did. And I wonder sometimes what would have happened if I'd stayed. But if I'd stayed, I wouldn't be here. Right?
Yeah.
So it all worked out. It all happened the way it was supposed to.
It has indeed.
Yeah.
And again, thank you so much. I got to meet one of my idols and get the backstory of someone that I've been listening to for years too, and so many others have. So thanks for sharing that story.
Thank you very much.